With any kingdom, there needs to be a king, and this king also has a responsibility for his subjects when they come. We'll call them the grain farmers. The job of the king is very important. He needs to have a vision for the kingdom, the North Star in the direction that will lead to prosperity. And he's also in charge of the creation of laws. Without law and order, the kingdom is weak. This king should have an understanding of the responsibility that comes with his role. When they come, he needs to treat the grain farmers with fairness. He needs to be willing to adjust his vision of the kingdom based on feedback from them. When listening to them, he needs to be able to determine what's an actual issue and what's simply programming from the customs of other kingdoms. The grain farmers are an important part of the kingdom, and in order to be a grain farmer, they must trust the king's vision for the kingdom. They grant the authority to the king on what type of crops they'll plant and things like that. But authority isn't just given blindly, it needs to be earned. It's a symbiotic relationship between the king and the grain farmers. However, problems arise in the kingdom when the grain farmers rise up and try to change the way things are done. Every now and then, they decide the direction that the kingdom's going isn't working for them, and they violently try to overthrow the king and install themselves in power. This doesn't happen often, but it does happen. It's very important that the king quells these uprisings. The grain farmers came here because they believed in the king's vision, that life within the kingdom is better than life outside of it. If they don't feel like the king can provide that, the grain farmers are free to leave. But as long as they are part of the kingdom, they have to follow the law of the land. In any good kingdom, open dialogue is important, and the grain farmers should have the right to voice their concerns and opinions, but mutiny isn't acceptable. Just as a captain has a set course for their ship and the crew agrees to follow it, if they don't like the plotted course, they can talk with the captain or they can leave the ship. With the role of the king, he has responsibility to ensure that the grain farmers are taken care of. He actually needs to make sure life is better under his rule. He needs to be willing to listen and make adjustments based on their feelings. It's a tough job, and when the uprisings come, it can be incredibly uncomfortable quelling them. It can feel like a dictatorship. But if the king isn't willing to enforce the laws of the land, everyone suffers in the long run. Without a strong king, the grain farmers feel like they're lost at sea without a rudder. Anxiety rises, and no one knows who's in charge. That's why, in order for the king to run a proper kingdom, he must have a vision. He needs to listen to actual feedback from the grain farmers, have laws, and enforce those laws so that they're respected. But he also needs to understand, if these grain farmers want to leave, that's fine. There are an abundance of grain farmers available. His role is simply to cultivate his kingdom so that the grain farmers want to come, without being too attached to which grain farmers they are in particular. Once there, the grain farmers living in the kingdom should be there because they believe that life in this kingdom is better than any other kingdom. And it's the job of the king to make sure that belief is a reality.